Yes, well, good day all, and welcome to this presentation. I'm Susan Toth-Cohen, and I'm from the uh, East Coast of the United States, Philadelphia, and presenting on behalf of myself and my colleague, Sara Stainthorpe, and we're both from Thomas Jefferson University. A little bit about us and our university. Jefferson's an academic health center that includes a Center for Interprofessional Practice and Education called JSIPE. And so this is noteworthy because it's an effort to have people work together and not be in their silos and to provide a better rounded education for students who are going out into the healthcare world into practice. A definition of interprofessional education might be helpful, and is that students from two or more disciplines are learning with, from, and or about each other. Note that our funding is provided by JSIPE. Sara and I are both lead faculty, and we are funded through JSIPE. Our programs focus in on vulnerable populations, specifically right now, people experiencing homelessness and patients with Alzheimer's disease and related disorders and their caregivers. And so these are virtual interprofessional programs. Right now, they're the only two interprofessional programs that do focus on virtual worlds and virtual reality. So a little bit about virtual reality and the background of it for our simulation specifically. You may know that virtual reality has been expanding tremendously in education and often now subsumed under the umbrella term extended reality or XR. And for the educator, it can be viewed as a form of computer technology that enables us to provide realistic simulated environments there that people can interact with each other to accomplish learning goals, interact with the environments and each other. And then the metaverse refers to a more expansive and immersive conceptualization of real time people being able to join each other synchronously across networks, many people at the same time, and that it's a persistent virtual space that can provide a sense of individual presence and continuity. And the author, Matthew Ball, that I'm quoting from, talks about how that presence and continuity include identity, objects, and communication. Now, one of the frameworks that we find very useful is the DICE framework that Jeremy Ballinson, who's also known as the father of virtual reality, created, and is that it's useful to healthcare simulations as well as other types of simulations because it guides the use of virtual reality to specific situations that are either too dangerous, or impossible, counterproductive, or too expensive to do in real life. And so for dangerous, for when you're looking at dangerous situations, I'm thinking specifically of situations where the student clinician could put the patient in danger through an action that they did. So it's better to practice on someone in a virtual environment. Likewise, some patients, including those with later stage Alzheimer's disease, do have behavioral issues, including aggressiveness. So the patient could potentially endanger the student. Impossible is an interesting category too, and I find that especially relevant to people experiencing homelessness because most of our students don't know what it's like to be part of a stigmatized population, such as people experiencing homelessness. And we also have cases that are varied, such as a young mother who it has become homeless because of a domestic violence situation. And so, for example, a Caucasian male medical student really would not be able to actually become a Latinx mom with 3 children in that situation. So um, it gives an opportunity to provide the experience of being able to practice empathy and communication. Counterproductive category is where the simulation could be done, but not really that practical or worthwhile to do in real life. Better to be done in a simulated environment, more convenient would be one reason. And then the cost. Say if you wanted to have a simulation of a disaster. It would take a lot to really enact that in real life and to have all the like, extras and people, simulated patients that were involved in that. So I think it's a nice framework for determining goodness of fit of using virtual reality. You certainly don't need to use it for every type of simulation or educational application. Now, this slide discusses our training program development through time. We started in 2017, launching the Persons Experiencing Homelessness Interprofessional Virtual Outreach Training. And it was really precipitated by a need from a housing first organization where it's a nonprofit agency that seeks to provide homes first and not insist that the person who's experiencing homelessness become clean from, say, substance use issues or alcohol issues, but helping them where they are right now and putting them into a safer situation by enabling them to have housing. And then we use the same format in 2018 to develop the Alzheimer's virtual interprofessional training. And during those years and up till I'd say about 2020, when the pandemic started, we were becoming more aware of what the benefits and limitations of our virtual platform, which was Second Life at the time. We used it for many years, but we found some issues that were problematic for students and for staff, particularly that often Second Life would have downtime where the simulators were being worked on, or times where the student was having difficulties because they had a computer that wasn't really up to speed, being able to handle all the memory capabilities, and the fact that students had to download a separate program in order to participate was something that was pretty I would say inconvenient for them, and sometimes impaired their ability to even participate. So during that time, we were becoming more aware of the technical issues. And then in 2020, when the pandemic came into force, I became exposed to different VR platforms because I was taking classes, something fun to do during the pandemic when, you can't really go too many places, but well, why not learn how to create VR? And so during that period, we began to think about, oh, okay, here's this platform, here's AltSpace, that was a big networking platform, and VR chat, and then spatial later, through the VR classes I attended, which were actually held in these worlds. So as a result of considering the different platforms, we decided to test spatial using a series of case studies using our customary continuous quality improvement process, which was what we were using before. Really wanting to build upon any mistakes that we made or things that we discovered that could make things run better. And so that led us to conduct a series of pilot case studies framed within continuous quality improvement using the plan, do, study, act cycle. And our questions that we were most interested in answering were, because of the difficulties that we'd had with Second Life, some areas that were problematic, were how effectively can staff set up and use spatial to support students during the simulations? Because that came down to staff helping the students, because in many cases, students were not familiar with any type of virtual worlds. Surprisingly enough, some were, of course, but many weren't. And then, oops, sorry. Looks like I got ahead of myself here. Okay, and then so we wanted to also know how easily students could navigate spatial and complete their simulation tasks, as sometimes they had difficulties with the interface, especially because for anyone who's ever been in Second Life, it has so many options in the interface of things to do and look at and select and customize, that it can be overwhelming for someone who's never used it before, which was the case with a lot of these students. So how easily could the students navigate it? And then importantly, to what extent do students experience a sense of immersion in the simulation environment? And that was a question that we always asked the students in Second Life as well. How immersed did you feel? And they would rate that experience. And then finally, how well does this metaverse-based simulation format support student learning, particularly in regard to working with people who are in vulnerable populations within an interprofessional team-based context? So that's what we were really interested in finding out. And so these are the pilots that we conducted. The staff pilot was conducted using a focus on setting up the account and the avatar, which applied to both Pivot and Avid. We also, with the staff, we also used a brief simulation experience for them so they could get a feel of what it would be like to actually do the simulation instead of just observing and watching and helping students as needed. And you can see there that we gathered data from them in person and through Zoom. And we also had them do a post-simulation survey. Then the students and alumni in the second simulation, which was just 3 people in that, we really had hoped for more. And I'm calling it a focus group, but with 3 people, strictly speaking, it wasn't. I changed it more into a guided discussion, but provided some interesting results regardless. And then we had 36 students participating in the Avid pilot, with 20 of those 36 completing the post-simulation survey. And that consisted of the full simulation and debriefing. And I'll note that in the Avid, we did 3 different simulations, just like we would normally with running Avid. Now, here's the results of the staff survey of looking at ease or difficulty of spatial compared to Second Life. And so, as I mentioned, the initial setup, downloading or updating software, connecting to the internet, that was for them and for students involved a lot. And you can see that the mean score there was 3.6. So it was between easier and significantly easier. And as was for that group, changing the avatar outfit for a specific role, because in Second Life 2, the way the simulations are designed, for enacting these roles, students would enact the role of the provider, the patient, the caregiver, if part of the simulation, as it was with the AVIT simulation, looking at Alzheimer's disease and related disorders, and then an observer also, if we had a student for that. And then interacting with objects was interesting because it was a little easier, but not that much easier. And then using keyboard shortcuts was not easier, and moving around was pretty much the same, maybe a little easier. And then the other areas of locating tools that were required to engage in the simulation and finding locations within the simulation, as well as teleporting quickly to other locations, were easier, as perceived by the staff. So we'll see how it was a little bit different for the students. So that was the staff survey results. And then here's the pivot group discussion focus group. And so I began with an overall icebreaker, asking the students about to tell us about an experience that they had with a simulation that they had used before. And could be any type of simulation. They, most of them, all three of them, not a large number, talked about commercial simulations that they used, whether used on a computer, programmed through a laptop or other computer, or a mannequin. And then that they also moved from that then to discuss the extent to which their experience in spatial was beneficial to their learning or not. So they found it very easy to play around with spatial and grasp it as a platform. So those were the students, which seemed a little bit different than with the staff. And this was interesting. One of the participants noted, the pivot simulation has real people, meaning peers, unlike commercial simulations where it's more individualized, has computer generated patients. And so comments on that were related to how you had to be able to respond in the moment as a student enacting the role of, say, a provider or the patient, because it was not scripted. It was guided. They were given biographies of each patient and the provider's roles, but it was not completely scripted. And they also noted that spatial was easy, the instructions were easy to follow when creating the avatar and setting things up. As far as drawbacks, making it less beneficial to learning, they found it difficult to switch avatars in some cases, that within the simulation, they weren't able to find both avatars. A problem that they, as well as the staff, had is the issue of audio. Jumping to the third one now, and that covered things like the audio quality, but also whether they needed to be close to the other avatars to hear them or not. And it was kind of hard to tell what was user error and what wasn't. And then just like with Second Life, the participant said that, well, it makes computers choppy and freeze, takes up a lot of memory. And they didn't remember if it was the same situation as in Second Life. Well, from my experience, it was, but still, that was a valuable finding and something that pointed to an area that we needed to address. And one of the most common problems is that people are running these platforms at the same time that they have like Excel, Word, other games or video at the same time. And they made some general comments too that contrasted a little bit. So in the Avid pilot, where we had 20 people responding, this was interesting. Overall, my experience in the Avid program was positive. That was very much majority strongly agree or agree. Fully able to immerse myself in the client or provider role in the simulation. Also a strong finding, but there were some neutral and one disagree. And then as with the immersion and having a positive experience, the majority were saying that the case-based format was a good way to learn about the needs of a person with dementia and their caregiver. And then that it was pretty easy to use the virtual world and get around in it. And I include sample takeaways, even though they're not related to technology, just to show that these were very similar to what we found when we were using Avid with Second Life, and we also with non-virtual world simulations. This is really probably more about the role playing and about interprofessional education than it is about technology, which makes sense. Here's an illustration of one of the cases in Avid, a doctor's office, where the woman who has Alzheimer's is being diagnosed here by her primary care provider, who conducted a screening test and also had done the pharmacist, who's on the right, conducted a medication review, and that's showing that the cognitive difficulties are playing out there as well. As far as recommendations that the students made, many of them, I just have a couple comments here, but there were more comments about we need to practice this. We need to practice moving around. And so fortunately, we had another pilot scheduled and decided to create that virtual playground. And it worked out quite well. The students enjoyed it, and they were much more comfortable with the environment. So looking at points to discuss under the categories of usability and technical issues, the staff definitely found spatial easier to set up and navigate compared to Second Life because they felt like it was more intuitive. They did note that the audio quality was sometimes problematic, and so did the students. But again, we weren't sure how much was user related. Things that we know are counterproductive when using audio online, such as having too much ambient noise, or not using headphones or earbuds if you're having difficulty with hearing, with choppiness and quality of sound. Interestingly, they found that avatar identification was more difficult in spatial compared to Second Life because the visibility of the name tags in Second Life was much clearer. As far as engagement and learning value were concerned, participants across all the groups reported that the spatial platform promoted immersion and that integration of built-in audio versus external platforms made the experience more engaging. And then the student and alumni focus group emphasized the value of customization and spontaneity, as mentioned. So limitations, small sample size, response rate was okay, but we would have possibly had more diverse viewpoints with more. And it's possible that students who were not favorably looking at the simulation didn't respond, and that those who liked it were responding at a higher rate. So not sure about, so there were some possible influencing factors there. But overall, this was an experience where we used Balancen's DICE framework and included a platform transition from Second Life to spatial in an effort to enhance usability and immersion. We used multiple case studies to support interprofessional student learning. And our future plans are to expand the range of cases and programs offered and to build higher levels of interactivity into the simulation. We did have the advantage of being able to get some unexpected grant funding that was left over from another grant to hire an expert in virtual reality simulations to kind of add to the things we could do. And we want to continue to use our continuous quality improvement approach so that we can better prepare our interprofessional teams as students to meet the complex needs of vulnerable populations. That's what we're really about. So I find to thank JSIPE and also the peer reviewers who looked at this work. And here are our references, a little bit more about us, and our contact information. So hoping there may be time for a question or two.